Welcome to the Reimagine podcast. Each week, give yourself 30 minutes and meet the people working hard to create the future of insurance today.
Hi, this is Paul Tyler, and welcome to another episode of the Reimagine podcast. Laura, good to see you again.
Yeah, great to be seen, Paul.
And what is the topic of the day, and who do we have on our show?
Yeah, so our topic today is about mentorship and how to have an effective kind of two-way street mentor relationship. And we're lucky to have two guests with us today. And you are likely to recognize both of them, but maybe haven't seen them together in this context. So we have Neeraja Rasmussen, founder of Spyglaz, and we have Harry Monti, EVP Benefits Division for Symetra. So Paul, do you want to talk a little bit about our relationship with Symetra?
Sure. Harry, first of all, welcome.
Thank you, Paul. Glad to be here.
No, listen, first of all, I want to thank you for your partnership over the last couple of years as we've gotten our program launched. You were one of the first people we talked to, I think, and it kind of helped shape our program. Now you're on our advisory board and have valued your mentorship as we've worked through the process. No, I think we've had a very good complementary relationship to this point. I think first of all, your firm has given us a big vote of confidence and a good shot in the arm for some of the startups. In fact, I just got an email for one pleading for assistance to talk to some of your team, which is great. I think you've opened your doors to startups and key leaders in your company. And I think it's hard to underestimate the value of that. And you've also given us some good feedback in terms of how to run a program in a way that's valuable for a company, but not necessarily overwhelming or pushy. So, thanks. And so Laura, yeah.
Well, I guess Paul, if I can just jump in
absolutely.
There, I do just want to, first of all, it's been a pleasure. I mean, it's been terrific to work with the Reimagine team. I think it's been an awesome partnership, and Symetra is very focused on creating financial freedom for people across the country. And we have several pillars within our strategic focus. And one of them is to empower the future. And that directly ties into why we're here and partnering with Reimagine, because a big focus of that is about transforming the business and driving innovation. So it's a great fit for our culture and what you're trying to drive. So thank you for the partnership.
Yeah, absolutely. And Neeraja, I want to give you a second to introduce yourself and talk a little bit about your company as well.
Thank you, Laura. And just to echo what Harry said, I'm really delighted to be here and having this conversation with all of you. So my name is Neeraja Rasmussen. I'm the founder of a startup called Spyglaz. And Spyglaz is a platform for proactive customer retention, serving the insurance industry. And we use machine learning to predict future customer loss when retention action is required, upsell and cross-sell opportunities. And we do this by integrating into live customer conversations. So our solution integrates into call center software, CRM, any platform where customer conversations are happening. And prior to Spyglaz, I spent 20 plus years working for technology and financial services companies, managing customer retention, lead generation programs. So founding a startup that enables better customer conversations was just a very natural, next step in my journey.
That's great. Yeah, and we're excited to have worked with you this far, and excited to see where the future brings us as well. So jumping on into the conversation, we wanted to bring you both here to talk about mentorship and the value of mentorship. And I think to set the stage and the context, it's an interesting story, especially between the two of you. So, Neeraja, how did you meet Harry, and what made you think like Harry's the guy that I really kind of want to enter into a mentorship relationship with? Because as we know, for a lot of us who've been into these mentorship realms, sometimes it's amazing and sometimes it just doesn't click. So how did you meet Harry, and how did that work out for you?
So I met Harry through you and Paul, through the Reimagine, the Reimagine incubator, which sponsored and partnered with Symetra on their innovation partnership. And the way the process worked was the startups in the incubator were matched up with senior executives at Symetra. And I was paired with Harry for that mentor relationship, and it involved dedicated time with Harry in terms of we met every couple of weeks, 30 minutes, and the whole experience has been absolutely incredible. I've never had a formal mentor before. I've never consciously sought out a mentor. So this was my first sort of being part of a program. And it's just been an amazing experience.
Yeah, and it's interesting because you talk about what an important piece of it too. So seeking out mentorship versus mentorship finding you. I think there's instances in people's lives where we've looked for mentorship in certain areas or certain expertise, and sometimes it just kind of clicks. Like for myself, Susan Winkler of CTIFS, she's one of my mentors, and she and I have, almost a decade-long relationship at this point, and it was just something that clicked. And it's magic when you can have somebody within industry or profession who can both give you guidance, education, and then also sometimes just personal support. We can pick up the cell phone and say, can you believe, or can you help me with? And you have that person there for you. So Harry, throughout your journey thus far, what has mentorship meant to you? Have you had successful mentorship relationships, maybe some that didn't work out so well? What's it been like?
Yeah, I think mentorship is just critical for anybody's career and progression, whatever profession you choose. And it changes over time, right? I mean, to me, mentorship is very personal. You have to find those mentors that have the same style that you do, or a style that you're trying to replicate if you're trying to learn style things from a mentor. You have to have common interests in what to get out of the mentorship. Those are the ones that work the best. But it changes over time. Yeah, if I think back on my career, I started out as a CPA and worked in corporate finance in the insurance industry. I had very different mentors then than I do now as a P&L and business owner at Symetra. And so I think you really have to determine at points in your career what's most important for you to be working on and developing, what things are going to advance your career or advance your business in a way that aligns with what your goals are, and be very, very thoughtful about how you go out and seek those mentors.
And Paul, what's your relationship been with mentorship throughout your career? Because you've had a journey that kind of looks like this.
Yeah, I would say, I've been involved in sort of the, corporate mentorship, no offense to HR departments, planned by the HR department, where they kind of match you up with somebody, or, and Harry, it's been, I would say, not terrifically successful when I've had these things sort of like assigned to me. I mean, as you say, the matches are super personal. It's also the mentor you needed, in 2010 is not the mentor you need in 2021, is what I found. It's been a little more natural, where I've been in situations where, kind of like you described, Laura, you just kind of click or you don't click. We actually had one of our board members, Lee Launer, on. Yeah, we just clicked. He was super senior executive when I started at Met, and you know what? We've now worked. He said this on our last podcast: 23 years at the same companies. And thinking, wow, that's over 3 companies, and he's had a significant impact, and especially in the last 10 of my career. But I agree, Harry. It's almost like you need a board of advisors. You almost need a personal. Perfect world, you've got your own personal board, and you know what? There is some rotation. So I don't know. How do you personally, if you look at your mentors today, how many do you have? How do you actually manage people who mentor you?
So yeah, as I said, every relationship is unique, and so I have some mentors that around my personal life, right? About mentors about being a parent, mentors about being a good spouse, quite frankly. And I look for folks that I admire in the way that they handle themselves, and I try to, and it's very casual, right? You just have those conversations around things, the questions that you have, and you have to be willing to be vulnerable in order to be able to do that. On the professional front, it has ranged from having mentors that are people that early in my career took chances on me and put me into positions that I probably wasn't quite ready for, but took that risk, and that creates a relationship, and you just continue to try to press on that relationship and learn more and more. But as you said, I like the way you put that. It's almost like a personal board. And I think you have to have folks at different aspects of your life that you look to for advice. Be vulnerable and put yourself out there, and that's the way you learn.
Now, Neeraja, you do have a board for your company. Tell me that you got your board of directors, but then you've got your own personal board. Is there overlap? Is it different? Tell us, have you worked this over time?
I'm glad you mentioned the board, Paul, because one of the big transitions as a startup founder was before everything that happened before in my career was my corporate life, as I call it, which is I was an employee of a company. And those mentors were very informal. It's just, you click with somebody, like you said, and then these people, whether it's a friend or a former colleague, ends up being a source of support over the years. When I founded a company, the mentors started to look really different. And there's 4 types of mentors, I would say, that really play a big role in a founder's life. One is the board of advisors, of course, the people that are there to give you advice through the ups and downs of your entrepreneurial journey. The customer, the existing customer that wants to support you and give you a good customer reference, that's a really valuable mentor. And then there's incubators and accelerators. And this is the most important type of mentor because these entities, they make connections for you. They help boost your visibility. And I definitely want to give a shout out to the Reimagine Incubator, which is run by you and Laura, because we had built in 2019, we have the solution that we thought could add value to the insurance industry, but we didn't know how to get a foot in the door, how to start having those conversations. And it felt like this huge barrier. And thanks to the Reimagine Incubator, we're light years ahead of where we were when I got on that plane and, made that first trip to Hartford that summer. So they are entities, they're not people, but they play this incredibly important role in mentoring startups.
Paul and Laura, Neeraja really touched on something that I think is incredibly important there, and that is that there's a very thin line, blurred line between mentorship and sponsorship. And to me, the most important mentorship relationships are also sponsorships, and really doing things for people that help advance their goals and what they're trying to do. So, I really like the way that she described that.
Yeah, and then I guess just kind of following what you said. So I mean, there isn't a give and get clearly in a relationship like this, and it's not necessarily money. There are a lot of motivations here, Harry. So you open the door to the startups to create mentors inside your company. Tell us what's the biggest get at the moment for mentors inside Symetra to work with startups?
So, as we've talked about in the past, our partnership with Reimagine was not only about getting introduced to startups that might be able to bring solutions to the table as we try to transform our business, but it has also been about culture change. And so, part of this for me, probably the biggest win to date has been just getting exposure of leaders to folks who think very differently than someone who's been in the insurance industry using traditional tools and approaches for 20, 30 years. That exposure to people that think very differently has been a tremendous asset. And I already see some behavior change in the organization around referencing things that have come out of conversations with some of the startups and really just bringing that innovation to the table. I'll also comment on me personally, and my relationship with Neeraja has really been cool. I mean, she's taught me some things around what it is like for a startup to try to engage with carriers, to try to move the needle as far as revenue and advancing a business. Frankly, she's taught me a lot, given me a lot of insights as to what it's like to be a female CEO and founder of a company in a very male-dominated industry. That's very insightful for me, right? It makes me more knowledgeable, and also, giving me some insight into how machine learning works, right? And so, how can we take what she's done and maybe apply it in a very different way to other aspects of the business? So, those are some of the value points from my perspective.
So we talked about the value points and where mentors and mentees can add value to the relationship, but how do you go about identifying? So we talked a little bit about some successful examples here, but if I'm looking for a culture change inside of my company, how would I look to identify, or where could I look for potential mentors? So for people who are listening saying, this sounds great, how do I do it? What tips do you have? Neeraja, if you want to start, or Harry, either one.
No, go ahead, Neeraja.
So I think one of the things that was kind of unique about this opportunity was we were, through the Reimagine Incubator, presented with this opportunity, we being the cohort of startups in the incubator. And we were told, you have this opportunity to have dedicated time with a senior executive at Symetra, which is a major insurance company. And for any insurtech founder, that is an amazing opportunity, because we're always trying to get in front of senior insurance industry executives. And then all of a sudden we're presented with, you have dedicated time with someone like Harry, who's a C-suite executive, who's a business leader with P&L responsibility, who's a key decision maker. And that's a fantastic opportunity for any startup. I think what made the Symetra innovation partnership work is the fact that Harry and others in the company sort of articulated their goals up front. And they didn't come out and say it right, outright, but the message was, we don't want this to be a transactional relationship. And what I consider a transactional relationship is, you're buying something, you're selling something, you're trying to get a job, you're trying to get a promotion. So they wanted to sort of move that very transactional interaction kind of to the side and say, let's actually have a real conversation about, what does insurtech innovation mean? What does your startup do? Give us a chance to talk about some of our challenges. And I think that was the key to success, honestly. The fact that through that exchange, some incredibly positive things happened. So for instance, I really evolved my own perception, and this is what I learned from Harry and everything he shared about their business. I evolved my own perception of what insurtech innovation means and where Spyglaz actually fits into that ecosystem. So to anyone watching, Laura, to answer your question specifically, I would say, make the conversation non-transactional. Don't make it about some tedious pitch, and just make it clear that the goal is to really get closer in terms of insurtechs and carriers sort of having a deeper appreciation of what they're trying to do, what the other side's trying to do.
That's great. Harry?
Yeah, so we started this whole journey with an event that we called Fresh Perspectives, and it was about Symetra posing a very specific business issue that we're trying to deal with, about how to operate in the future, to a bunch of really smart people who have started their own companies. And it was just 5-minute discussions from every startup around, here's our reaction to what we think you, Symetra, should do about this issue. And yes, there very clearly was, and appropriately so, and here's how our solution might fit within that. But you have to expect that. But we came at it, as Neeraja said, from talking about the goal up front and talking about a business issue. And I think what that generates is trying to find the gems, right? Trying to find those things that the startups have developed that might not be exactly the product they have today, but could turn into something that is a solution for a company. And Paul and Laura, you've heard me say this so many times, you're probably tired of hearing me say it, but I have a passion around the fact that I think that the insurance industry has kind of approached the startup community very backward. It's been very much about going and trying to find startups. You get a pitch, you try to fit a square peg in a round hole, and everyone gets frustrated, right? It doesn't advance as fast as you would like. I like to flip that conversation around and build a relationship, talk about the business issues, and then find the skill sets and the solutions that the startups bring to the table and see how that can help advance the business goals. It's a little bit slower at the beginning, around developing into something that might be a transaction, but I think it can bring tremendous value to the relationships.
Well, I'm going to throw a little bit of curveball here, Harry, so you can pass.
I'm used
I
to
know
that.
you won't. So we are going to have another investor event. We're talking to your team as well on this, and Neeraja, you jump in here. It feels to me like we've got a lot of interesting companies stuck between angel investing and VC, and you've got, as you know, Neeraja, a long pipeline, really complicated. You've got to go through a bunch of iterations to really find the problem and find the person like Harry who's going to listen and want to adopt this stuff. So angels usually can't write big enough checks. And then the VCs are all kind of looking for these, $1 million, $2 million annual recurring revenue. But I'm going to tell you, by the time Neeraja you get there, you're not going to need them. So what's in the middle? I would have thought strategic VC from carriers would have done it, but I'd say probably 99% of the time, they just don't want to do follow-on investments with the VCs. So if we kind of look at the next wave of InsurTech, Harry, do you think a venture studio type approach that some of these VC firms is what we need here? Where, you take your problem, you give the problem, we find batch of startups, put something together, and we've got a custom solution for you? Or do we just need better startups to understand the problems better?
I think it's a combination of both, Paul. I mean, from my perspective, we clearly need to create the avenue for access to capital and investment for the startups. And to me, it's all about creating cash flow, right? Because some of the best ideas in the world probably have died on the vine because there's no cash flow and people have to give up. So to me, it's about creating some form of cash flow, which we're certainly trying to do that through some smaller engagements along the way. Until you can get to that bigger idea. But I do think that some of the solutions are ultimately more about taking the skill sets of the startups, the product they might have that fits one product area, and tweaking it, right? Changing it in a way that's going to benefit others. So, for example, Neeraja's product right now is primarily focused on products that I don't sell in my division of the company, but we've had discussions about how could her product and machine learning help in revenue generation within the group insurance space where I play. And that's been really helpful. And so, where that conversation is going to go, I don't know. But to me, that's the type of conversation that we have to be having.
Neeraja, what's your perspective? Like, if you could rewind, your business 2 years, or say, you've got friends coming up. I mean, what's the answer here?
Oh, that's a great question. So I think there is no easy answer. It's by definition, building a company is incredibly hard. And I think every founder faces the chicken or the egg situation where you need revenue to get investors, but without cash flow, it's really hard to sort of, get to that revenue milestone. So I think just for me personally, what's really worked for me and my team is to just dive in and not worry about monetization. So let's say we have an insurance company that's kind of interested. It's a new technology. They haven't really used it before. Is just dive in and say, hey, we'll do this at very low cost for you. And then that helps us sort of, get that referenceable customer. And then we get the second customer and so on. So I think it's the principles of building a business the old-fashioned way. That's where I'm, that's what I've been sort of focusing on, because that whole conundrum of if you spend all your time trying to raise money, you're not going to be focused on having the customer conversations and building out a relevant product. And if you focus entirely on the customer conversations, which is what I've been doing, frankly, the investor discussions sort of, are sidelined and cash flow can become an issue. I'm optimistic. I think by nature, I'm optimistic that, we're building something that has value and we're going to get adoption and we're going to onboard customers and the investment will happen naturally. But, we'll see what happens.
Now, it made me think of something. So you're talking about customers and you're talking about money. Obviously, both are valuable. as a startup working to build a business, and obviously everyone's experience is going to be different, would you say that that first customer is more valuable than that first million in investment to be able to say that they've locked in that customer, or is that first million more valuable?
To me personally, the first customer is more valuable, even if they're not paying very much or it doesn't cover all your costs, because the most important thing is, I think, for any business is validation that you have a product that actually adds value. And there's no, there's so many stories of founders who raised a lot of money, but then their product didn't really fit the market and they weren't able to get customers and they had to fold. And I think that with that money comes a lot of stress and responsibility. And I think the more natural path is to try and get your first 2 to 3 strong customer relationships in place, people who believe your product is adding value and are willing to support you and be a strong reference.
So Neeraja, I love that perspective, and I'll share a couple things. One is some of my favorite conversations that we've had have been around just discussion of value proposition, right? And how someone who is running an insurance business views the value proposition of a startup, and that gets back to that customer relationship and making that sale. But I'll also relate what Neeraja is saying to something very very close to me, and that is, I joined Symetra probably about 7 years ago, and we've been focused on growing a life and disability business organically, and it is incredibly hard to do. And very early on, we considered ourselves almost like a startup. And the way that we got traction was you get those early customers, you prove your value, you create a great customer experience. Well, guess what? Those distribution partners keep coming back for more because we're creating value for our mutual customers. And it's the same thing, just in a different way. So I couldn't agree more with your perspective on that.
Okay, so Mentorship 2.0, Hartford. Okay, we had Startup Bootcamp for 3 years. Startup Bootcamp left. Neeraja, that was brought a ton of energy. A lot of startups, a lot of energy into this, and a lot of it pulled in a lot of energy from the community. And I think we at Startup Bootcamp ended with maybe 150 mentors. Is that about right, Laura?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. So here's a problem for you. Okay, what's the next generation now, Harry? To get. My perspective is people who are execs in the insurance industry have never been busier than they have in at least as long as I've been in business as they are today. What is, what's the highest and best value, that the program could offer to execs to pull them in? And then Neeraja, for you, from a startup perspective, what would make startups say, oh my gosh, I'm going to be part of that program because they're doing this for me? So I don't know, Harry. How do we get like 50 more people like your team involved in this?
Well, I always come at it from the perspective of what is the business value and what's the business problem that people are facing. And so I mentioned early in this discussion that one of our strategic focus areas is empowering the future, right? It's very much about innovation and transforming. This market and industry is changing so fast, and it's only been accelerated by the pandemic and the way that we're interacting with customers and partners. And if executives are not paying attention to transforming and innovation, then they're going to fall behind. And so, to me, it's about you talk about value to an executive. I bet every single executive that you can talk to is carving out some portion of their very busy schedule to talk about innovation and transformation aligned to their long-term business strategy. And to me, this is a perfect pillar, within that discussion for them to get introduced to a lot of really smart people who think very differently. So to me, that's the value push to get more folks involved in these types of discussions.
Neeraja, what are startups most hungry for today? If you know the Hartford community really well, hey, come to here to meet people who do what for you?
So specifically, Paul, this partnership in terms of what it's done for us, and I'm speaking to all the startup founders listening and watching, I can tell you the biggest value out of this program. It's a great program. And the value we got was other than, access, dedicated time with a senior executive at a big insurance company. I think you've probably heard this. InsurTech founders often complain about it's really difficult to sell to carriers. Oh my God, the process, it's so long, and it's speed of insurance and all of that. And there's some truth to that, but there's another truth that's often overlooked, which is we may have a hypothesis. I mean, all founders do about the problem you're solving, but very often we're pitching solutions without really having a solid understanding of what the carrier's pain points are, what their real business needs are. And I think what these conversations with Harry have done is they have helped us evolve our messaging, our use cases, our value proposition. And through his lens and through his feedback, we are in a much stronger position than we were before. So it's a little more of a long-term view, because it's not the dream of you pitch and you close the deal, but it's a really important part of the process, is understanding how your solution fits the market and how to talk to carriers. And again, I think that's what's truly visionary about this program is it recognizes the value of building a relationship over time, and how through that exchange of ideas between startup and carrier, you can actually drive even greater innovation. So that's my experience. It's like what I got from this whole experience was we have a much stronger message. And I feel that, and it's already resonating. I've been in some pitch situations, where we fine-tuned our value proposition based on Harry's feedback, and it's been incredibly effective. I mean, that's the value to me.
Okay,
is the growth.
So what if I'm going to play this out? Suppose we had a Shark Tank for, I'm thinking around the Hartford community, where we've got concentration of carriers. Well, let's pick a crazy one. Marine insurance, right? And by the way, it's not marine. It doesn't have anything to do with boats, as I found out. It can, right? So you have a marine, you'd have all the business, say 4 or 5 people on the business side who know the marine specialty insurance line inside and out. You get a chance to pitch and get feedback. If that were your market, would you sign up? Would you stay up until midnight to get a slot for this? To talk and pitch to five people from different carriers at once.
Absolutely. I mean, it's because the connections are really important. The conversations are really important. If you don't meet the people, the conversations are not going to happen. So that's almost like, the first step. And I'm hopeful that, that's just going to grow and become more dynamic in the Hartford community. And, I'll hope to be there for more of those introductions and interactions.
It's interesting. Something that's kind of resonated as our conversation has gone from point A to point F is there are a few things that keep coming up, and it doesn't really quite matter if we're talking about mentorship, if we're talking about pitching, if we're talking about being founders or carriers. It seems to all come back down to relationships and trust. So it's interesting that I think some people, if they keep their eye on that piece of it, and managing relationships through whatever that piece of the journey is, whether it's during, a mentorship type relationship, or if it's going in and, listening to 5 individuals talk about marine specialty line insurance. It's the relationships you build. And I think the long haul piece of it, we live in a society that wants everything now or through the phone or at our fingertips. And some things I think we just need to respect in a slower way. And for me, at least, relationships are one of those things. So I find it interesting that no matter where our conversation today has taken us, it's always boiled down, at least for me, to those 2 things.
Yeah. So I guess we're close to the top of the time. 2 questions I'll throw out, and Laura, I'll let you close this. So, Harry, if I'm a startup, and what are the 2 or 3 attributes that you want to see from me before you're going to voluntarily make 30 minutes on a busy calendar every couple of weeks to talk to you?
So I will tell you, I'll come back to the Fresh Perspectives event that we had, and it was very interesting to see the different approaches that all the startups took to that conversation. And for me personally, and this isn't the same for every executive, right? So I'm just answering for myself here. Is the startups that show the most interest in learning about the business issue and applying their skill set and expertise to how to solve it without it being about their specific product at that time. Those are the startups that resonated, those pitches, so to speak, that resonated the most with me, because that shows an interest in having a dialogue, in wanting to explore what the real business issue is before just trying to pitch a product. And I know that's hard, right? Every startup's trying to generate revenue, and I completely respect that. But if you want to take a little bit of a longer play on this and really make it relationship based, I think it's about being a student of the business, of the people that you are talking to, really listening, and then taking that really unique skill set that you have and helping that person apply it to their business issue. That to me is just huge.
Oh, that's great. And Neeraja, let me flip back to you. So, yeah, I know insurance time because I've worked in insurance, as Laura knows, a long time. So, what keeps you engaged with me? Describe, what's the type of relationship that keeps you engaged, wanting to talk, wanting to expose your business?
Through the incubator, through
Reimagine? No, through mentorship. Like, we get connected. Yeah, I'd like to talk. I'm happy to mentor you. Do you want to be mentored by me? What are you looking for from in a person like me? What are the 2 or 3 things that say, look, this is somebody I actually want to invest time in, and I want to open up to and maybe expose things about my business or my challenges that I wouldn't to a client or a prospect?
That's a great question, Paul. So I think one of the first things I'd be looking for is just advice, is just insight. You've been in the insurance industry for a long time, and you have a good sense of, and you've spoken to a lot of startups at this point, of how a product fits a particular need. So I think that would be one of the first thing is help me evolve our value proposition and help us make it a better story. I think the second part of it would be connections. Again, assuming you've been in the industry for a long time, if potential investors, potential customers, is helping us, helping make those connections. And I think the third part of it would probably be just a insight on the industry in general, things that people don't necessarily talk about. I think for a lot of founders, that speed of insurance piece of it, like how long it takes, that's takes some getting used to. Let's put it that way. It's a new thing. And it's like, oh, I didn't realize my runway, I need to be funded for 12 months instead of 6 months, because that's how long the sales cycle is going to be. So those sort of operational things that are very specific to the industry. And, I'd just be looking for support and growth, and also anything I can give back in terms of my time or volunteering, or make it a two-way street instead of just, you helping me.
All right. So fun question to wrap our conversation up today. Out of anyone in the world who has ever lived at any point in time, if you had to pick your dream mentor, and it's okay if you have several, you can just choose one. So I won't make you feel like it can only be one person for the end of time, but one of the individuals, who would you choose for yourself and why? So as you're thinking, I'll start. So when I just created this question in my head, I thought Walt Disney would be an interesting person to mentor. Talk about someone who can create an idea and turn it into all sorts of reality. And by the way, figure out how to monetize it to levels that I don't even think he was anticipating is pretty genius. So I would say Walt Disney is my answer currently. Neeraja, how about yourself?
Okay, so I have two mentors. So the first is Harry. And that's because he's my first official mentor, and it's been a great experience.
Well done.
And the second would be, I think the second would have to be Elon Musk, because when he started talking about space travel, people were like, you are crazy, and it's real. And so it's like somebody who has this big vision that's sort of light years ahead of its time. And I think that would be a very interesting person, not specific to my startup, but just in terms of opening up my perspective on what the possibilities are.
I love it. Harry?
So, I would be, I'd be remiss if I didn't say, my dad. All right, it's make a call out to my father, who was my first mentor, and really helped me shape who I am today. But yeah, I'm gonna go completely off the grid and give you a really strange answer.
Right.
I think a really cool mentor would be somebody like Stephen King. Right, I'm a fan of his books. Talk about somebody who can come up with a really creative idea and tell a story. And to me, business is all about telling stories. It's about telling your value proposition. It's about, just being out there and attracting both partners and customers. And I love his creativity. His books are a little weird, I'll admit, but I love people with those really creative minds that see something and can turn it into something.
That's awesome. And Paul?
Yeah. Here's kind of a weird one, which is like, okay, how about Vince McMahon at the WWF, right? Now, you think about where wrestling was like in the 40s, 50s, 60s, right? Like you took something and you kind of kept working until it's so mainstream, right? That you've got, jets flying these people right around, and you've kind of created a whole culture around some of the stuff. Not that I'm a massive wrestling fan, but I respect people who've had that persistence and kind of continued vision and built organization and kind of managed to turn something into a juggernaut. I mean, there are other examples, but I think, Neeraja, persistence is just tough, right? Like you have something, you got to hold on to something, an idea that's real, and you can't fool yourself, but at the same time, just continually going back and polishing. Eventually you end up with something that's a circus sideshow into a program that's on mainstream television and huge around the world. So that's mine.
So really what we're saying is if anyone's going to take anything away today, it's dreaming about a mouse, wrestling, space, and Children of the Corn. It's kind of the takeaway.
Yeah.
It's a great wrap up.
Thank you.
It is.
Thank you.
You never know where these shows are going to go. Harry, thanks so much for your time. Neeraja, awesome. Look forward to seeing all your good work that will come in the next couple of years here for you. And Laura, thanks for pulling this together. Join us again next week for another very interesting episode of the Reimagine Podcast. We want to especially thank today's sponsors, Launch and Symetra.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the show, please rate and recommend us on iTunes, Stitcher, Overcast, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can also get more great information about this company and other great startups at imagine.nsre.com.